Hey, everybody, welcome back to this very stormy edition of Archaeology After Dark. I'm, of course, your host, Daniel Rhodes. My guest today is Dr. Jesse Goliath. Jesse, thanks for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Jesse, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my background is in forensic anthropology. I got my master's and PhD from the Ohio State University. At the University of Ohio State, I was working there specifically in skeletal biology, microscopy, histology, and kind of looking at ways to look at bone at a micro surface instead of just the standard macro. So what does that mean is I was looking at bone beyond just the general whole bone, kind of see what we can look at for age, maybe taphonomy, maybe disease or trauma that you typically don't see on the surface of the bone.
Okay, awesome. So that brings us to today's topic. It's something a lot of people ask me about. A lot of people just have a general interest in is forensics, anthropology, archaeology, and how all those things are tied together. So, Jesse, my first question is, what exactly is forensic anthropology?
So forensic anthropology, it is a subspecialty of the biological anthropology subfield. What we're doing is we're taking biological experience or biological training in osteology or archaeological training and applying that to a medical legal context. So working with individual cases that are younger than 50 years or so. So typically anything that's considered as a contemporary case of a person who's been deceased. So anything related to the medical legal time frame versus more the archaeological, bioarchaeological. So anything that is 50 years younger is considered the medical legal time frame. What we're doing within forensic anthropology, just as a field, is we're trying to use our knowledge as anthropologists, our knowledge of anatomy, osteology, archaeology to apply that to either a missing person case, a either a secondary burial, primary burial, could be scattered remains, any of these different contexts that we see individuals who are deceased in.
So, at what point do people, like, I guess since it is forensics, it has to be a crime has to have been committed. At what point do they realize, hey, we need a specialist in this area to come take a look at it?
And so there's kind of these major questions that we ask if it's medically legal significant. So with anthropologists, usually we kind of look at things like, is it human? So that's one of the major ones. If it's human, then that's definitely medically legally significant. We do deal with some animal cases of abuse, but predominantly focusing on human. Is it bone? So is it bone or is it not bone? And so we're kind of helping the medical examiner or coroner and police investigators with those kind of basic questions. Like, is it human? Is it bone? If it is those things, what led to this individual being in this situation in this site? We don't actually do any kind of cause of death analysis. We're just there to help them kind of with the context of the burial and or with the anatomy, the overall osteology. What do we see? The medical examiner is the ultimate authority in determining cause of death. And so as part of we're a specialist that is helping them when they don't have all the soft tissue. They can't go through and do a pathology assessment or a typical autopsy. Usually we're dealing with either completely decomposed or skeletonized remains, or partially skeletonized where the pathologist or the medical examiner really can't get a lot of information from the individual.
Okay. So I imagine you've seen some disturbing stuff out there.
I've seen a lot of different contexts, a lot of different incidents. And the thing with forensic anthropology, and specifically in forensics, is you have to be able to, one, communicate if you have any concerns. There is a lot of these traumas that can be associated with being near death or around death. And so having a close community of colleagues and friends that you can communicate and talk to about these things will really help you with dealing with the potential traumas from being around death. But ultimately, what brings me relief or kind of helps me through it is that we're bringing closure to these families. We're helping to identify a missing person that didn't have a voice or was killed or dispatched in a way that they didn't really get to have a final closure. And so from the work I did with the missing POW MIA accounting agency in Hawaii, where I was working for DPAA, the Defense POW MIA accounting agency, we were helping to identify missing soldiers from World War II, Vietnam, Korean War. And so those individuals, they made the ultimate sacrifice. They gave their lives to protect our country, protect our freedoms. And as our promise as a country, we need to bring them back home to their families. And then with the more recent cases, looking at individuals who homeless, maybe those who are marginalized individuals or groups within our communities that they need a voice to, that need to be resolved, identified, and sent home to their families.
And see, that's a connection I see to archaeology already is when we're out in the field, excavating a site, we want to be respectful of who these people were, what they did, and how they did it. But we also want to give them a voice in their history, like showing, oh, these were who these people were, and we can actually prove this is how they did it, how they lived, who they lived with, and so on and so forth. And it fills in the gaps in history.
Exactly. And that's the beautiful thing about anthropology is that, yes, I'm a biological trained anthropologist. I know anatomy and histology and osteology, but I'm also trained in linguistics and cultural anthropology and archaeology. So we're not just using that one hat for these work. We're communicating with families, we're communicating with law enforcement. The work we do, the scientific work we do, and explaining it to them in their context that they can understand, in terms they can understand. But also, we're trying to, with these cases, help to give voice to some of the disparities that exist in the United States today. We see that a lot of missing people tend to be women of color. They tend to be those who are the LGBTQ plus groups or affiliation. And so these individuals who are already marginalized within our society are more likely to be seen in forensic cases. And so kind of giving those individuals a voice when society in general is not really aware that they're missing. Or for example, indigenous women who are going missing and we don't really hear about in the news every day, that this is happening every day.
It is, and it has become I don't know if a lot of you like get to be involved in things like Twitter and things like that. I mean, I know you want to, but you see cases like this trending on almost a daily basis that people are going missing. And, it's our responsibility to make sure that these people, if we can get them home safely, hopefully, but, if we can't, we need to do something to help fix it because it's
Yeah.
a problem.
Yeah, and that's kind of the work I'm doing now at Mississippi State. So I'm an assistant professor at Mississippi State in the Department of Anthropology and Middle Eastern Cultures. I'm also a senior research associate with the Cobb Institute of Archaeology. And so as part of my work there, we've created a Mississippi missing person repository. And so this Mississippi repository is going to mirror what's actually already occurs in Louisiana. So Louisiana has their own repository that's a state mandated database that is funded through the state. And so what we did, Mississippi State, my colleague, Dr. Jordan Linton and I created a Mississippi repository that we're going to gather information from the federal databases that currently exist, as well as state and local agencies to kind of, one, find how many people are missing in the state of Mississippi, and two, where are they missing from? And then potentially what health disparities already exist. Are these areas that have low police presence? Are these areas that have low resources in health and social services? So actually can kind of look at the bigger pictures of this people are missing, but why are they missing? And why are they missing for so long?
And how is it that people are, going missing and no one noticing it? Like, how can we
Yeah.
fix that?
Yeah. So really, instead of, sadly, I deal with the end result of missing people, and I'm kind of wanting to find ways to get to the point where we don't have to do a forensic recovery or forensic investigation about this person, that we find them before they are either die of causes due to missing or trafficking or any of that.
We got really heavy on this topic.
I
Really
know.
So what we're going to do to make this a little more lighthearted is we are actually going to switch over to a question that one of our fans of this program actually submitted. Jesse, you do this professionally, and everybody's a fan of crime shows like CSI, NCIS, various gruesome murder podcasts, First 48, things like that. When you see a program like this, how accurate is the depiction of the forensic side of it?
Well, if you actually had a real life one for one match, it'd be so bored. No one would want to watch that because a lot of it is paperwork, documentation. A lot of the work we do is making sure that we are following legal precedents, legal criteria, either Daubert or chain of custody, any of the general context with forensics is that we have documentation, photography, and evidence to prove what's happening or what's existing. Because what's happening, especially, in archaeology, once you've gone through a site, you're doing destructive analyses. And so the same thing in forensics. We're going to a case scene, we're going to try to get the remains out. If there are remains, we're going to gather evidence, we're gathering material. It's a destructive process. So a lot of it is time consuming photography and paperwork and documentation to make sure that we have everything we need, and that when this does go to court, that there is no question or doubt that we follow protocols and procedures that are within a forensic medical legal context. So you don't see people like me carrying guns or having badges. We don't have legal authority. We're just working with the police and law enforcement of our region. And so that's one of the major differences I see, is that usually a lot of these shows, these people go there, they have badges, they have guns. And it's like, that's only if you're a law enforcement agent. Usually a lot of the forensic scientists I know stay in the lab, or if they're a CSI, they'll go out, collect their evidence, and then give it back to the police or to the actual laboratory itself. So that's one of the major issues. Another one is that, it's dramatized. Everything's done quickly. So DNA analysis is done within a couple hours. Facial reconstruction, all the computer technology that you see being used on these shows, some of it doesn't exist. It's kind of the pseudoscience. And it'd be nice, it'd be great if we could have some of the technology I see on these shows, but it's just not part of the field yet.
I mean, I'd settle for a pair of those stylish sunglasses that everyone gets from somewhere, and no one, actually says, hey, these are where we got these sunglasses from. They might be helpful in the field.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, again, that's the cool factor for sure. You gotta look cool doing what you're doing. So sometimes some of the work I've done, if I had some nice shades that I could pull down, be like, yep, I found something, pull down the shades, dramatic effect, music in the background.
And make some kind of, delightful pun about it, like it's a hole in one. But sadly, folks, it is not that dramatic. At the end of the day, wearing a pair of stylish sunglasses does not cover up the layer of dirt that you are wearing home with you.
Exactly. I was going to say they need more dirt in these shows. A lot more dirt, a lot more grime. Also, some of the other odors and aromas in the air. You may not be able to experience that from your TV screen. So,
yes, people, for the love of God, when you're going home at the end of the day, feel free to spray something on yourself. You don't know this because it's you, but the other people around you do realize how bad you smell at the end of the day. So if you could throw on like some body spray or something for the ride home, your coworkers will appreciate it, and they will probably do the same.
Yeah. Sometimes when we've gone out to sites to do some work and we're done, our boots are covered in mud, and you're going to the gas station or something. It's like, where were they? I'm like, you don't really want to know. It's okay.
I mean, I drive home from a site and my shoes are covered in red clay. I have a shovel in the back of my car. If I got pulled over, people would have a lot of questions that honestly I wouldn't be prepared to answer.
Yeah. And the funny thing, going back to the question of which are these shows realistic, the only ones I really can say are for sure more realistic is the first 48 is a really good show if you're trying to find how police do their kind of investigative work, and then Forensic Files, which Forensic Files is a little dated in terms of the cases they do, but I think that's probably the most accurate of the work that we actually do in terms of not anthropology, but in forensic sciences as a whole. So those are two shows that I've seen that I'm like, yeah, that's pretty close to what we do if you're trying to see something that's a little more realistic.
So when you see people take intuitive leaps on these crime shows, are you like, that's not true, but I mean, dramatization, it gets people interested?
Yeah, so something I've learned just from this work is that you have to be careful what you say, because sometimes there's police around that are going to write this down as part of their case reports. There's news reporters who are in the area who are investigating too and trying to find out more information about the the individual, the victim, or the suspect of these cases. And so in general, when I'm at a case, I really only say or talk about things that are relevant to the case that's appropriate at the time. So any kind of speculation about, oh, how this person died or potentially why this person's here, I tend to leave for closed doors with the law enforcement, because you never know, there's a lot of reporters who hear about something, especially in small towns around where we are. Someone will call the local news, they'll have those telescoping lenses and the video cameras that they can record and hear everything, but what you're saying eventually could be in court or could be subpoenaed because it's now been disclosed to the public. And so that's why you see a lot of, especially what happened sadly with that shooting that occurred in Texas, a lot of police and a lot of CSI and crime people really aren't going to say much because they don't know. They don't have enough information yet. But reporters want to know. The reporters and the public want to know as much as they can about what happened, the incident, how many individuals are involved, how many deceased. And sometimes I'd rather not say anything than give you a wrong information or a wrong answer that later I have to say I made a mistake or I misspoke or I was not in the right wheelhouse too. Because also when you're dealing with a lot of forensics, it's like I'm the anthropologist, but there's also the detectives on the case. There's the CSI guys, there's the DNA analyst, there's the medical examiner. There's even local agencies that are dealing with talking to the family. And so there's a lot of different personnel involved in just one particular case. So you may be stepping out of your lane when you talk to some of these news reporters about certain things too.
I've had those occasions, like especially when we're doing like an archaeological program with where like the public can come and go and ask questions. They're like, so you actually know who this specific individual was, like you know their name and everything, and you can actually tie them. And honestly, if I actually knew a person's name, that would have been great, but it's rarely that easy. You have, you know, an assumption or a educated guess. It is okay to tell people that you don't know because I mean they're probably going to twist what you say anyway. But yeah, but it is okay to say you don't know.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes you don't know what's being quoted. So I had when I've given talks about work I've done, sometimes they either misquoted or said something different than I intended or it didn't come out in the right context. So that's something you also have to be careful with, not necessarily in forensics, but in any of your careers, if you're dealing with news or media, that you have to be clear about what you're saying and don't over emphasize, don't kind of speculate or add extra than what you need to say, because it can come out as a misquote or misconstrued later on. And it's forever in there. Now the internet has it for all eternity.
Yeah, the internet, that's something people in this field, every time they see something on the internet, it's like, oh, it's on the internet now. It's not going to go away.
Yeah.
Like within the hour, it's going to be trending on Facebook and Twitter. And then our PR person, you know, somewhere is like, why do these people make my life harder?
Yeah, and it's just one of those things. So just to give you kind of an actual real life what happened with that situation. So I was working on a case in Pontotoc, Mississippi. It was highly televised, an individual who was executed in Mississippi. Don't need to really say their name out to give them more press, but this person was executed for their crimes. As part of their last will and testament before they were executed, they left a letter. In that letter was a map to a missing person, that this person that they had also killed. So they already killed one individual and then killed the second one and left a map. And so as part of our work, we were trying to help find this missing person. But again, the news already had known about the suspect, the crimes he'd committed. And so there was this media buzz behind us finding this missing person. And so that was then the kind of thing we had on our back the whole time. It's like, oh, we don't find this person, or what's going to happen if we do? Is there going to be this kind of news media explosion? But luckily we were able to find the person, give that family closure, and ultimately the news media was very respectful of the family and the family's wishes. So they only talked to us, gave us a press conference for one day, and then that was it. And we no longer had to deal with the suspect or his story or kind of perpetuating his legacy.
Yeah, that's, one thing you don't want to give the people who are out there committing these kind of terrible things more credit than they actually should get for doing it, or
Yeah.
notoriety, I should say. So, in regards to the media, the crime shows, the news, and things like that, having forensic anthropology circulate as it does, do you think that creates more interest that people want to take in it because it's out there for people to look at?
Oh, yeah. When I tell people about the work I do, people who have no interest in science at all want to hear about. It's a cool job. It's something that people think about, like, oh, this guy gets to go out and find missing people and use detective skills to kind of piece together a puzzle that a lot of other people can't do, using osteology or using bones to tell you more about this person. So it's a cool job. So I understand why there's this exposure and the hype, is that it's not something, it's not your 9 to 5 insurance agent or, all these kind of other practical, very practical jobs and needed accountants, those people who are needed in our fields, in our world, to keep the world going, but it doesn't have that same wow factor like forensic anthropology does. And so with the CSI, they call it the CSI effect, that after that those shows were created, there was this big wave of interest in forensic sciences. And so that wave really it's kind of died down a little bit from, let's say, the late 90s, but it's still a major component that universities want to have our forensic programs. They want to create forensic institutions. And so students are interested in the area, and also police and law enforcement. They need more individuals to fill those roles. One thing that we have an issue in Mississippi, and I'm sure the same thing in Alabama, is that there's not enough expert personnel to fill the jobs that are needed in forensic labs, in police stations, in medical examiner offices throughout these states. We just don't have the personnel, the qualified personnel to do it. And so there's a demand for jobs. Forensic science is still a very high seeking job market in terms of job opportunities. There's, I think it's a 17% increase in market rate for forensic sciences. So it's one of those uptrending market jobs that people want and people need in their states. But yeah, that's the issue. That, and also another area that I look at is diversity and inclusion and equity. And so one thing that we've noticed is that these states don't have a lot of representation of diverse peoples in forensic science. So increasing diversity in the forensic science field is also important too. So encouraging students of color, those who are marginalized, to get more involved in forensic sciences, not necessarily in anthropology, but in all the aspects: biology, chemistry, entomology, so studying bugs and the life cycle of bugs, legal, so law school, going in that route, or even within law enforcement, police or CSI techs, medical examiner techs. All these different aspects need people, and we need more of them in those fields.
So, along with all the scientific training, like the osteology, the archaeology, and the field education, do forensic techs and people have to get law enforcement training also, like procedural training?
So in general, within anthropology, it's not required, but I always recommend students take some kind of either criminology or criminal justice courses. One, so they're familiar with the criminal justice system as a whole, that you're a part of it. And two, so you do have the idea of jurisdiction and jurisprudence and what is appropriate, what is legally appropriate, chain of custody. Some of these ideas that we don't really talk about in general undergraduate education, you still need to be aware of in working with other people in the medical legal world, that understanding what it means to do chain of custody forms, or what does Daubert criteria mean for casework, that it has to be testifiable methods that you're using, that has to be peer reviewed. So when you're looking at doing a case or doing a specific method, it has to be a valid method that can be tested by your peers and is validated by your community, your scientific community, to then be used for expert testimony, for expert witness. So even those kind of little nuanced things, you definitely need to have a background in before you become an expert in the forensic world. Also joining professional memberships like the American Academy of Forensic Sciences. That's something I recommend students do if they're interested in forensics. So the American Academy of Forensic Sciences is the largest professional organization for forensics. And it's broad in that has multiple sections. So there's an anthropology section, jurisprudence, a general section, a biological section, odontology or dental section, multimedia, digital media. So there's all these different aspects of forensics that are represented at the Academy.
And Jesse brings up a great point. If you go to things like these academy meetings, archaeological society meetings, these are a great way to meet and network and find jobs, educational programs, ask the questions that you really need to get answered, but you can't actually, regularly find someone to answer. Like I was interested in studying, faunal analysis or something like that. You can find a specialist to help you do that. That was just something I came up with off the top of my head. Don't specifically go look for people to study plants with, because you're going to go through a long list of people and they won't always be the best people.
Yeah, but Daniels is right. It's like a lot of it is finding people who you can ask those questions, and that's why I'm happy to give this talk today. Is just kind of, I'm here, I'm a face. If you're interested in forensics, please feel free to reach out to me, and I'm happy to, if I don't know it, like Daniel said, I don't know everything. I'm not an expert in all things, but I maybe have a colleague who can help in that area. And so that's what we try to do now, especially as teachers, as educators. I'm not the expert in all things. I'll try to teach you what I know and with my expertise, but there's a lot of colleagues in my network that I can reach out to and help you with whatever questions you have in terms of jobs, careers, or research. And so the field is very broad, but also very narrow at the same time, that the networks are small and the academy is small. Once you get in the upper levels of the academy, you kind of know of everyone, or they know you, good and bad. So.
Yeah, I actually went to a meeting the other day and somebody told me my reputation preceded me, and I gritted my teeth a little bit. I was like, oh no. Like I visibly tensed up as hard as I tried not to.
You're like, I'm hoping it's all good.
Oh no, I'm getting ready to have to make some very wordy apologies to several people, probably. So we're about to wrap this up. Jesse, say people, want to get started in forensics, forensic anthropology, things along that line. What advice would you give them?
Well, one thing is just start looking at the literature that's out there. Because one thing is, you don't know what jobs are available because you just haven't done some of that research. And so start looking at Journal of Forensic Sciences, maybe Forensic Science International. Start going to your library and seeing if there's any journal subscriptions that are free available to just look at what's going on in the field, because that's kind of where you start to see, oh, I didn't know there was microbiology or kind of pathology in plants, or looking at bees and kind of honey, and there's all these different aspects of forensics that people just really aren't aware of. Scavenging activity, taphonomy, you name it, entomology, anthropology. There's so much you can do in the world of forensics. It's just start looking, start reading. If you're follow people on Twitter that are scholars in the areas that you're interested in, see what they're publishing. That's kind of the first step, is just looking what literature's out there. And then next is reaching out, asking those, you see the jobs that you want, and reach out to those people who have those jobs and say, hey, what did you do to get where you are now? And most of them are going to say, oh, go to college, get a biology or chemistry background, maybe an osteology or anatomy background. Yeah, that's a given, but really just kind of engage with individuals, because the more interest you show in them, the more likely they're going to reach out and be like, yeah, I have internship opportunities, I have potential volunteer opportunities that I would like to give you if you are interested. And so that's another way to do it, just asking for volunteer internship opportunities with your medical examiner's office, maybe your local police department. Maybe if you have a crime lab in your area, they can let you shadow them or get some credentialing to go actually do volunteering there. all those things really would help you, one, get to know, is this something I want to do? Or is this something that I'm just interested in as a hobby, or something that I hear about true crime podcasts. Should I be doing this kind of work because I like these podcasts? That's the kind of answers to those questions, actually shadowing and volunteering in these areas before you fully commit to it too.
Yeah, there's nothing like, this is just my personal experience. There's nothing like being waist deep in a hole and questioning your life choices. Like, is this really what I wanted to do and where I expected to be at this point in my life? I imagine it's a lot of the same stuff in forensics.
Yeah, there's sometimes we're like, yeah, I've been here all day in the pouring rain. We haven't really found what we're looking for, but I'd rather be here than doing anything else. That's kind of where that mindset is.
And Jesse brought up a great point. If you start following somebody you're interested on Twitter, and you'll see their work is really great, but you'll also get to know them as a person. Like, I've started following several historians that I am fans of their work, but I also follow them on Twitter, and it'll be like, so yeah, I was writing earlier and I got bit by my cat. It happens. I'm like, wow, this is like an actual person with a person's problem.
Yeah, we're real people. You just see the mystique of our job, but forensic anthropologists, we got to put our pants on one leg at a time too. So,
well, Jesse, thanks so much for being here. Everybody, I think that's going to wrap us up for today. So be sure and stay tuned to the show. We've got more exciting stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Bye, everybody.
bye. Thanks, everyone.